So that was about inventory. Next topic is long-lived assets, which is long-term assets or also called fixed assets. So the topic starts with the same conversation that we had in inventory, that is capitalization versus expensing. What costs are capitalized, what are expensed. So remember, if any investment or if any expenditure increases the life of asset, it is capitalized. Increases the productivity of asset, it is capitalized. Or increases the usefulness of the asset, then capitalized, which would again be productivity actually. So if there is any uh, expense which is done for maintenance purposes, then that is expense out. So for example, if I purchase a machinery, that is capitalized. If I put oil into machinery for running it, that is maintenance and that is expense out. Another key point to notice that any expense which is required to bring asset into usable form is capitalized. So anything, any expense to bring asset into usable form is capitalized. Any expense increases life, increases productivity is capitalized. Anything related to maintenance is expense down. Means if you buy, you first need to buy an asset. When you buy an asset, then you can use it. So buying an asset would be capitalized. So any expense prior to bringing it into usable form will be expense, capitalizing it. If you capitalize it, it means asset goes to balance sheet. If you expense it, that means expense goes to income statement. If it goes to balance sheet, then eventually it will flow through flow to income statement through depreciation. When you depreciate it, depreciation expense would go to income statement. So here is a short example. Assume a company Trofini SA incurred the following expenditure to purchase a towel and tissue roll machine. So its purchase price is 10,900. This is necessary to use the machine to bring into usable form. So it should be capitalized, including taxes. 200 for delivery. Until and unless you get the machine delivered, you cannot use it. So should be capitalized. 300 for installation. Until and unless you install it, you cannot use it. So should be capitalized. And testing of the machine, and 100 to train staff on maintaining the machine. So this is related to staff training for maintenance. So if it is maintenance, then it should be expense down. In addition, company paid a construction team 350 to reinforce the factory floor and ceiling joists to accommodate machine's weight. Until and unless you make these changes, you cannot use machine or you cannot put machine there. So that means again capitalized. Company also paid 1500 to repair the factory roof. Now the question is this repair necessarily required to use the machine or not? So to repair the factory roof, a repair expected to extend the useful life of factory by 5 years. If this repair is for maintenance purposes, it should be expense. But if it is increasing the useful life, then it should be capitalized. And 1000 to have exterior of the factory and adjoining offices repainted for maintenance reason. This is not adding productivity, this is not increasing useful life, this is just for maintenance. So if you have exterior painted or not, that wouldn't impact productivity of useful life. So this should be maintenance. Repainting neither extends the life nor improves the usability, which clearly means it is should be expensed. So which of these should be capitalized and which of these should be expensed? These all costs should be capitalized, these all should be expensed. So you should, if you just remember the basic criteria that we discussed at the start, you should be able to do it. So life, productivity, and expense to bring in usable form. So I think if you remember these three criteria, you should be able to do it. And maintenance specifically goes to expense if it does not increase useful life. Moving on. So when you are investing into an asset or buying an asset or maybe buying a real estate or building or anything, you can either finance it through cash, you can go and buy it on cash, or you can finance it through a loan. Maybe you can mortgage it, you can do some financing over it, or you can borrow a loan to get it, to buy it. If you borrow a loan, you pay some interest. So if specifically an asset purchase is financed with a loan, then that interest should be capitalized and become a part of the asset. So interest costs are capitalized if the borrowing is specifically done for that particular asset. Now there are two different treatments in IFRS and US GAAP. So IFRS says that if let's say you have to make a building and for that building you have borrowed loan. So you have borrowed loan of $10 million for that building. You will be paying some interest over it. When you pay an interest, let's say interest is for example 10% and let's say 5% and interest is 500,000. This is your interest. So this is something that you have to pay. But if I have borrowed 10 million and I am making a building, I will be investing this 10 million over a period of time. I will not invest all of it today. So that means some of this would stay with me. When it stays with me, I will invest it somewhere. When I will invest it, I will get some return. So let's say my return is 250 or 300. So IFRS says that the component that you capitalize should be the differential of these two, expense and income. You should capitalize 200,000. US GAAP says that you should capitalize whole 500 and show this 300 as income, interest income separately. So this means IFRS says that you should take net proceeds and US GAAP says you should not net it off, you should just take it on consolidated basis. So
this thing about interest expense capitalized as value per asset eventually. Is this the basis of the discounted cash flow model?
sorry,
Is this the basis of the discounted cash flow model? Value
ये समझ नहीं आया सवाल.
DCF जो होता है वैल्यूएशन होता है.
हाँ,
उसमें भी वही होता है ना इस एसेट से रिलेटेड जितनी भी एक्सपेंसेस हैं एंड
किस एसेट से?
एनी एसेट इन्वेस्टमेंट.
DCF में तो एसेट देखते ही नहीं है. DCF में तो हम फ्यूचर कैश फ्लो फोरकास्ट करते हैं और उसको डिस्काउंट कर देते हैं टू प्रेजेंट.
फ्यूचर कैश फ्लो होता है इन्वेस्टमेंट
ऑफ एनी इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं दे. ऑफ एनी इन्वेस्टमेंट से मतलब है हाँ पूरे कंपनी के जो फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज होते हैं या हाँ इन्वेस्टमेंट के जो होते हैं, हाँ इन्वेस्टमेंट के जो होते हैं कैश फ्लोज. हाँ
वो वही कॉन्सेप्ट है कि उसमें भी इंटरेस्ट एक्सपेंस incurred if you borrowed for that asset.
नहीं, उसमें इंटरेस्ट एक्सपेंस तो कहीं नहीं वो करते. मतलब आपका जब फ्री कैश फ्लो आता है तो ऑटोमेटिकली उसके अंदर सारी चीजें सब्ट्रैक्ट हो गई होती हैं ना. हाँ तो मुझे सवाल समझ नहीं आ रहा, इसलिए आप ब्रेक में पूछ लीजिएगा. Okay, so any other questions? So that is expensing or capitalization. If you have capitalized something or recorded it on balance sheet, it will eventually flow to income statement through depreciation. If you capitalize, assets increase. If you expense, income decrease. Here assets will be higher, income will be higher. Here assets will be lower and income will be lower. In initial periods. In subsequent periods, if you have capitalized it, you will charge depreciation. When you charge depreciation will be higher and income will be low. If you expensed it out already, there will be no depreciation. Depreciation will be lower, income will be higher. So this is how it is in initial and subsequent periods. So remember this. Another key point to note is that if you are capitalizing interest expense, it is going to balance sheet and not going to income statement. If it is not going to income statement and you are calculating, for example, interest coverage ratio, so generally you may pick up only expense from income statement, but that again would not be the right reflective of the overall interest coverage, because this is also the interest which you have to pay. So generally what analysts do is that for interest coverage and other ratios, what they do is that they take interest as interest expense on income statement plus interest capitalized on balance sheet. So they take total interest payment and use that total to calculate coverage ratios or any other ratio, so that it gives a better idea about the company's solvency and liquidity position, because in any case company has to pay this as well as that going on income statement. Here is an example. Builder as a hypothetical company borrows 1 million euros at an interest rate of 10% per year on 1st January 2010 to finance construction of a factory that will have a useful life of 40 years. Construction is completed after 2 years, during which the company earns 20,000 temporarily by investing loan proceeds. So interest rate 10%, borrowed amount 1 million. This means that the interest payment will be 10% of 1 million, and 10% of 1 million will be 100,000, correct? So this is the payment and it received 20,000. So if it is using IFRS, then it should net it off, and in IFRS it should capitalize 80,000. But if it is using US GAAP, it should capitalize 100,000. So under IFRS, amount of borrowing cost eligible for capitalization is reduced by 20,000. Interest income from temporarily investing the investing loan proceeds. So the amount to be capitalized is 180. Sorry, hypothetical company interest rate of 10% per year on this to finance this. Oh, okay, so construction is completed after 2 years. So this is a 2-year period, and so it should be capitalized for only 2 years. So for 2 years, the total cost for 2 years will be 100,000 into 2, which is 200,000, and this should be 180,000, and this should be 200,000. Under US GAAP, the capitalized amount should be 200,000. So key point to remember is that, remember, in IFRS you net off proceeds, in US GAAP you do not net off proceeds. You take it as it is. Where will capitalized borrowing cost appear? So capitalized borrowing cost will appear on the company's balance sheet. Why balance sheet? Because it is capitalized, and capitalized means going on balance sheet as a component of property, plant and equipment. Why? Because it becomes a part of the asset itself. In the years prior to completion of construction, interest paid will appear on the statement of cash flows as investment activity. Why is it investment activity? Because it is being capitalized. When we capitalize, it is an investment activity. Over time, as it is depreciated, so when it depreciates, what does it mean? That asset will reduce in value. When asset reduces in value on balance sheet, where does it go? It flows to income statement through depreciation. So this is how it will be. First you capitalize on balance sheet, then it flows to income statement through depreciation.
Sir, last statement I didn't understand over time of the property depreciation.
So you record it as asset on balance sheet. Now once you record an asset on balance sheet, what do you do next?
Depreciation,
Depreciate. So when you depreciate it, where does it go?
income statement.
Income statement. So that's what they are saying. Over time, as it is depreciated, the capitalized component,
Interest component.
so interest component is capitalized, right? So it capitalized means that it is recorded on balance sheet. Now over time you will depreciate that.
Oh,
When you depreciate asset, you will also depreciate interest because that is a part of asset cost. So when you depreciate it, it goes to income statement through depreciation expense. Because whether you call it interest, you call it PP&E, you call it whatever, it is an asset. Capitalization means it is asset. And asset has to either be depreciated or revalued or carried at cost. So these assets are depreciated. Moving on, intangible assets. So with respect to intangible assets, remember that under IFRS there are three criteria, uh, key criteria which should be met for fulfilling the definition of identifiable intangible assets. That is, they should be identifiable. Identifiable means that you should be able to identify that asset, that this is an asset, and you should be able to separate it from other assets. So you should separately be able to identify it. So for example, if there is a patent, if there is a software, you would know that this is the software, this is separate from the other plant, property and equipment or whatever. Under the if you cannot identify it, that then you can make any asset which is unidentified, and so that is not allowed under the control of the company, because if it is not control and under your control, that means it will not, the economic benefits from that resource will not flow to you. Expected to generate future economic benefit. An asset should generate future economic benefit. If it is not expected to generate future economic benefit, it is not an asset. In addition, two recognition criteria must be met. So these are definitional criteria. In addition, in order to recognize, you should have two more criteria. It is probable that expected benefit of the asset will flow to the company, and cost of asset can be reliably measured. If cost cannot be reliably measured, you cannot record that as intangible asset. Although that will be intangible asset, but you cannot recognize it until and unless you can reliably measure its cost. So for example, if you have internally generated an asset, intangible asset, and you cannot reliably measure its cost, then you cannot recognize it. Goodwill, remember, is not considered an intangible, identifiable intangible asset. Why not? Goodwill is not considered an identifiable intangible asset under IFRS. Why not? Because it cannot be internally created. If it is internally created, then you do not know what the value should be first, and you do not know that whether the economic benefit will really flow out of it to the company or not. So that is the reason why IFRS does not call goodwill as an intangible, as an identifiable intangible asset, and this goodwill will only be recorded in times of acquisitions. So it is actually the difference between identifiable assets and identifiable liabilities. So goodwill itself is not an asset being created. Goodwill is the differential between identifiable assets and identifiable liabilities. How? So for example, let's say there is a company which you are buying. It has identifiable assets of $100. It has identifiable liabilities of $80. And so its net assets, identifiable net assets are $20. And then you pay $30 to buy it. So this differential is goodwill, it is not internally created asset or internally created intangible asset. For this reason, IFRS does not explicitly call goodwill as intangible asset, because calling it as intangible asset would mean that this is an intangible asset, this is an asset which can be created by the company. While it is not created, it is only acquired in acquisitions. Three ways in which intangible assets are acquired. How do you acquire them? So it either comes out of business combination. So for example, goodwill would come out of a business acquisition or a patent, or you purchase it. So how do you purchase it? For example, you purchased a brand. For example, you purchased a patent or purchase anything from any software from any other party, or any rights or any license, or you create internally. But when you create internally, remember our discussion from previous class, we discussed when you create internally, it is very subjective, and so there are restrictions on its recognition on balance sheet. If you have internally created it, mostly it is expense. Only in certain conditions it is capitalized. For example, in IFRS, you capitalize it in development phase only, and in US GAAP you capitalize only if feasibility is established. Only if feasibility is established and you know that now these are the cost of this asset and these are the benefit which I will get out of these assets, and you have a fair idea that you will be able to make it and use it. Otherwise, on just expectations or not having cost or not having reliable benefit forecast, you cannot recognize intangible asset created internally. So usually internally created assets intangibles are expense. Usually, um, mostly they are acquired either in acquisition or through purchase. So this is intangible assets. Once you have acquired an intangible asset, it gets recorded on balance sheet. Once it comes on balance sheet, then what do? You take it to income statement through amortization. Just like any other asset, you take this through amortization as well. So either you can amortize it or you can impair it. Impair means that you can write down its value. If it has a definite life, you know it is for 5 year, 4 year, 8 year, whatever, then you amortize it. If it does not have definite life, if it has indefinite life, for example goodwill, then you cannot amortize it. Why? Because it does not have a life, it will be there forever. So then you will impair it. So remember these key definitions and stuff. This will come in later as well, but for now just remember it, that how do you record it. So goes to balance sheet and then flows to income statement. So here is a question: after reading financial statements, IFRS and analysts following intangible assets, which of these asset is intangible as is an intangible asset with finite useful life under IFRS? Product patent expiring in 40 years. Product patent is intangible, correct. Expiring in 40-year, finite life, correct. Copyright, intangible, correct. No expiration date, does not have definite finite life. So this cannot be the answer. Goodwill does not, the IFRS does not call goodwill as intangible. Acquired 2 years ago in a, does it have finite life? No, goodwill does not have finite life, it has indefinite life. So again, cannot be the answer. So only patent meets these two criteria. Patent expiring in 40. If it was patent never expiring or having an indefinite life, then again it wouldn't have met this criteria either, because criteria are intangible as well as finite life. So only product patent with 40 years meet this criteria. So product patent, yes. Copyright, no. Product patent, yes. Copyright, no. Goodwill, no. So B is the correct answer. So question can be as simple as this one. If you just read it out carefully and you know what they are asking, finite life, intangible asset, you should be able to do it easily. Otherwise, if you do not focus on the question and do not and miss out this finite life thing, then chances are you will end up giving a wrong answer. So read out whole question carefully and find out for these keywords such as finite, useful, life. This is something that we discussed earlier as well. So if you capitalize, asset will be higher. If assets are higher, equity will be higher. Why? Because income is higher. As income is higher, return earning is higher and equity is higher. Expense cost lower. Net income current period higher. Expense cost lower. If you expense it, net income lower. Net income in subsequent period lower. If you expense it, subsequent period it will be higher. Cash flow from operations. Cash flow from operations is dependent on your operating income. So if net income is higher, it will be higher. And if net
depreciation.
cash flow from operations wouldn't be impacted by depreciation. Cash flow does not include depreciation. So no matter if depreciation is high or low, cash flow will not be impacted. It is due to income. If you do not record an expense, that would result in higher income, and higher income would mean higher cash flow. Cash flow from investment, if you recorded it in income, it will go to cash flow from operation. Cash flow from operation will, sorry, if you recorded it on balance sheet, then that means it will go into cash flow from investments. So cash flow from investments will be lower. If you record it on P&L, it will go into cash flow from operations. So operations will be lower, investment will be higher. Debt to equity ratio lower if equity is higher, debt to equity is lower if asset is higher, debt to asset is lower. And here opposite higher. Interest coverage in current period, what is interest coverage? Interest coverage is interest divided by profit before interest and tax, EBIT, what you call it, earnings before interest and tax. No, interest divided by EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. So your income here is higher. If income is higher in current period, then overall interest coverage should be lower, should not be higher. Okay, so interest coverage can be measured using two sources. One of the formulas that we discussed earlier was interest divided by EBIT, and another formula is, sorry, not interest divided by EBIT, it is EBIT divided by interest. EBIT, it is coverage, so EBIT divided by interest, and another is cash flow from operations divided by interest. So if income is higher, EBIT is higher. If EBIT is higher, then this will be higher. If CFOs are higher, then interest coverage will be higher. In current period and in subsequent periods, income will be lower. If income is lower, then interest coverage will be lower. And if CFOs are lower, then interest coverage will be lower. So again, if you just know the concept of capitalization and expensing, you should be able to identify all these impacts. Should not be difficult. A key trick point is to know impact on current and subsequent period. And when reading the question, make sure you read it correct. Sometimes they may ask you about current period impact, sometimes they may ask you about subsequent period impact. So do not jump to the conclusion. Make sure you read it carefully. So if they have asked you about subsequent period, then your conclusion will change or will be opposite. So instead of income being higher, then income will be lower compared to expensing method. Any problem so far till here? Depreciation and amortization of long-lived assets. Okay, so when we depreciate, there are many different methods used for depreciation, And three of the key methods that we will discuss are straight line depreciation, reducing balance method, which is also accelerated depreciation method. Accelerated means reducing balance is an example of accelerated, in which you record higher expense in initial period or units of production. What do you do in a straight line? In a straight line, you find out the depreciable value and you split it equally or evenly throughout the useful life. So for example, if I tell you that assets cost is $100, its residual value at the end is $10, and all let's $10. So what is depreciable value? Depreciable value is 100 minus 10, which is $90. So if I distribute it evenly throughout the life, let's say life is 9 years. So if I distribute it evenly, that is $10 every year for 9 years, then that is known as straight line method. Accelerated depreciation is in which I will allocate more depreciation to initial years and lesser to remaining years. And unit of production is in which I will tie up this depreciation with the use of the asset. If I am using asset more, I will charge more depreciation. If I am using it less, then I will charge less depreciation. Remember one thing in all of these methods, if your residual value is 10, then you should at the end arrive at 10, because this is the value, final value at which you will be able to sell the or remove the asset from balance sheet. So let's do it through an example. Estimated residual value is $100. Useful life 4 years. Estimated productive capacity, production in each of the 4 years, this. Okay. So and the cost is 2300. So in straight line method, what do you do? First of all, you calculate depreciable value, which is cost minus residual value. So 2300 minus 100. So 2200 is your depreciable value. If you are using straight line method, you will split it equally over the useful life. Useful life is 4 years. So that means each year you should allocate 2200 divided by 4. This is your depreciation expense. Any problem? Now moving on to accelerated method. In accelerated method, you charge higher expense to initial years and lower to later years. And how do you do this? You charge it on a basis of rate. So instead of allocating equally, you determine a rate and you keep multiplying that rate with the net book value to arrive at the depreciation expense. Now that rate can be anything. If that rate is 2 times the rate of a straight line method, then that is known as, that accelerated depreciation method is known as double declining method. So double declining method is the one in which rate of depreciation is equal to 2 times the rate of straight line method. Any problem so far? How do you get the rate for a straight line method? So you are depreciating over 4 years. So if you are depreciating over 4 years, every year you will depreciate 1 divided by 4, and 1 divided by 4 is 25%. So this is the rate for a straight line method. If this is the rate for a straight line, double declining method rate should be 25% into 2, which is 50%. Any problem so far? So that means in double declining method, you will keep depreciating at 50%. Now moving on, how do you do this? So you start with 2300, your beginning value is 2300. How much depreciation should you charge? You should charge 50%. So you take its 50% and that is your depreciation expense. Once you have charged this depreciation expense, your ending value will be 2300 minus 1150 equals 1150. Any problem? Next year this becomes your beginning value. Again you charge 50%. So you charge 50% and that is 575. So 1150 minus 575, you are left with 575. Next year starts with 575 now. Again you charge 50%. When you charge 50%, it is 288. So 575 minus 288, 287. Any problem so far? Now you start with 287. When you do 50% of 287, how much will you get? You will get 143.5 or 144, correct? But this is the last year. As this is the last year, what should be the value at the end? Value at the end should be residual value, which is 100. So that means any remaining difference between net book value and ending value should be charged in depreciation in this year, because there is no next year to charge depreciation. So then you do not take 50% of 287, but rather you take whole of this difference as depreciation. Why? Because if I take 144 as depreciation, my ending value will come out to be higher than 100 and I have to end it at 100. So any remaining differential should be charged here at between these two. So this is how you use double declining method. Any confusion in this? And another method is units of production method. What is units of production method? In units of production method, again you charge depreciation not based on any random rate, not based on straight line method, not based on 2 times straight line, but based on utilization of the asset. So this asset can produce 800 boxes in its life. In its life, this machine can produce 800 boxes. In first year, it produced 200. That means you utilized 200 upon 800, which means 25% in first year. In second year, you had 300. That means you utilized 37.5%. In third year, you made 200 boxes. That means you utilized 25%. In fourth year, you made 100 boxes. That means you utilized 12.5%. So these are the utilizations in first, second, third and fourth year. Any problem so far? What value do you have to depreciate? You have to depreciate 2200. Why? Because initial value 2300 minus residual value 100. So your depreciable value is 2200. From this 2200, first year you will depreciate 25% of 2200. Then you will depreciate 37.5%. Then you will depreciate 25% and then you will depreciate 12.5%. So in some years it will be higher, expense will be higher. In some years it will be lower. There is no fixed trend. The trend depends on the utilization of asset. This is known as units of production method. Any problem in this?
The carrying amount is ending NBV.
Carrying amount is that amount which is shown on balance sheet. So yes, it is ending NBV. This is the amount which is reported on balance sheet. It is the closing balance of any asset or any liability. So when we say carrying amount, remember this simply is the closing balance of asset or liability. This is the amount on balance sheet. Amount on balance sheet is known as the carrying amount. This is the amount at which you are carrying a liability or carrying an asset on your balance sheet. Impact of depreciation method on financial statement. Again, it should be very simple and obvious. If you are using a straight line method, now one thing to remember is that when we say lower or higher, it does not mean it is actually lower or higher, it means it is lower or higher compared to other method. So this is the comparison in between these two. So if it is a straight line, expense will be same throughout here. So if I ask you that will the expense be higher in or lower in initial years of straight line method, you would say it will neither be higher nor be lower, it will be constant. But when you are asked that will it be higher or lower compared to accelerated, then you can answer it that it is lower in initial and higher in later period. So make sure again you read the question right. Do not confuse it. And make sure you know the context in which you are being asked a question. Initial net income higher. Again, these all are comparison with accelerated. If expense is lower, it will be higher. Initial assets higher. Why? Because you have depreciated less. So balance sheet value will be higher. Asset are higher. Equity is higher. Why? Because net income is higher. Return on asset. Return on asset is net income divided by asset. Asset is higher, net income is also higher. So what should return on asset be? Return on asset should be higher due to net income and lower due to asset. But with which one would have higher impact? Numerator will have higher impact, as we discussed earlier in inventory as well. So as numerator has higher impact, overall ROA should be higher. ROA should be higher. Turnover ratios, what are turnover ratios? These are ratios in which your asset is in denominator and sales is in numerator, some kind of asset or equity, whatever. Sales are not changing, asset is higher, so overall turnover ratio should be lower. So again, as long as you know concept, you should be able to do it. I would advise not to memorize it, but do it conceptually. That is better, so that you do not forget it in your exam. So when we started this topic, or when we were in initial phases, or when we were discussing the reading on balance sheet, we discussed one key difference between IFRS and US GAAP, which we said we will discuss later again. And that difference was that IFRS requires component method of depreciation, while US GAAP permits use of component but does not require use of component method. What does it mean? It simply means that if, let's say, you have a machine and it has two components, component A and component B, you combine these two and then make this workable. So IFRS would say that depreciate this component separately and this component separately. US GAAP would say that you can either do this or you can depreciate whole of it together. But IFRS requires you to depreciate separately. And how do you do this? Here is an example. Hypothetical company purchases a milling machine, a type of machine used for shaping metal, at a total cost of $10,000. $2,000 was estimated to represent the cost of rotating cutter. Total 10,000. 2,000 is rotating cutter. A significant component of the machine. Company expects the machine. So if 2,000 is rotating cutter, 8,000 is rest of machine. Company expects the machine to have a useful life of 8 years. 8 years. With a residual value of 3,000. And that the rotating cutter will need to be replaced every 2 years. 2-year useful life and residual value 0. Why? Because it will be replaced completely. Assume the entire residual value is attributable to the milling machine itself. And assume company uses straight line depreciation method. What is the depreciation? So for this component, depreciation is 2,000 divided by 2. Why? Because residual value 0, number of years 2, So depreciation amount for cutter is 1000. For this part, residual value is 8000 minus, sorry, depreciable value is 8000 minus 3000, divided by number of years, which is 8. So 5000 divided by 8, which is 625. Total depreciation 1625. This is component method. That is checking out the residual value and everything, every estimate of each component, and then depreciating it separately. A key point to remember, IFRS requires it, US GAAP permits it. So keyword is required and permitted. There is a difference between both. Okay, amortization we discussed earlier as well, that when intangible is recorded, it is amortized. You can amortize it using straight line method, just like depreciation. Revaluation method, we discussed that IFRS permits it, US GAAP does not permit revaluation. So here is an example on it. A hypothetical manufacturing company has elected to use revaluation model for its machinery. Assume for simplicity, company owns a single machine which is purchased for 10,000 euros. First day of fiscal period, remeasurement date occurs simultaneously when the company's fiscal period ends. At the end of the acquisition, assume fair value is 11,000. If it is 11,000 and you are using revaluation method, you will revalue it. When you revalue an asset, the entry is asset debit and revaluation reserve credit. There is a reserve which you create. So asset debit by 1000, revaluation reserve credit by 1000. On balance sheet, you increase the value to 11,000. On equity, you increase it by 1000 through revaluation reserve. Any problem so far? Okay. So you take it to 11,000, 1000 increase in the value of asset will appear in other comprehensive income and be accumulated in equity under the heading of revaluation surplus, revaluation surplus or revaluation reserve, whatever you call it. At the end of second period after acquisition, assume fair value of the machine is determined to be 7,500. How will it be recorded in financial statement? So it started with 10,000, went to 11,000. When it went to 11,000, you created a revaluation reserve of 1,000. Now it is going down to 7,500. When it is going down to 7,500, first step is that you will reverse this reserve. It does not exist anymore. Yeah. So this is minus 3,500. From this minus 3,500, minus 1,000 goes to revaluation reserve. For rest of the 2,500, you do not have any reserve created. It means it is an additional loss. So you charge it as loss in your P&L.
Gain or loss in revaluation.
Yes. So that will go as a loss in revaluation in P&L. Why? Because you do not have any reserve with which you can credit it. There should be a balancing entry. What is the entry? Entry is asset credit. When you credit it, something should be debited. So you debited revaluation reserve. A reserve cannot be negative. So then you debit P&L. And that's how your loss flows to equity. So overall equity will be down by 3,500. But how will equity be down? 1,000 through revaluation reserve and 2,500 through P&L or retained earnings. Any questions, problems? 2,500 income statement, 1,000 to revaluation surplus. Impairment we discussed earlier as well, that when an asset fair value decreases, we impair it. Impairment means reducing its value on balance sheet. When you reduce its value on balance sheet from A1 to A2, there is a loss which you are making. This loss is known as impairment charge, and this impairment charge goes to P&L. Now the question is that how do you calculate this impairment charge, or how do you know when to impair and when not to? So remember, method differs in IFRS and US GAAP. So first let's take IFRS. IFRS says that impairment, first question to ask is should the impairment be done or not? So IFRS says you should record impairment if carrying value is greater than recoverable amount. If carrying value is greater than recoverable amount, you should impair. This is what IFRS says. Any problem so far? Now next question is, what is this recoverable amount? So IFRS says that this recoverable amount is higher of the two. What two? A, value in use, and B, fair value minus cost to sell. So when do you impair? You should impair if carrying value is greater than recoverable amount, which means carrying value is available on balance sheet. Recoverable amount has to be estimated. How do you estimate it? What is it? It is higher of these two. What is fair value? Simply your market value. Cost to sell, you can estimate it. But what is value in use? Value in use is present value of future cash flows from asset. So this is your recoverable amount. You calculate these two. From these two, higher of the two is taken as recoverable amount. Any confusion so far? Once you have it, you compare it with carrying value and you charge impairment. What is impairment? Impairment will be carrying value minus, sorry. Yeah, so differential between carrying value and recoverable amount will be your impairment. You will reduce carrying value with this impairment amount and arrive at recoverable amount. On your balance sheet, asset will go down and that differential will be recorded on income statement as a loss, impairment charge. Any problem so far? This is IFRS. Now let's talk about US GAAP. First step is, should the impairment be charged or not? So US GAAP says that impairment should be charged if US GAAP says that impairment should be charged. You should impair if carrying value is greater than undiscounted future cash flows from asset. Remember, this is not value in use. Value in use is discounted future cash flows, present value of future cash flows. Here it is talking about undiscounted future cash flows. So it says if carrying value is greater than undiscounted future cash flows, then you should impair. Next question is, how much should the impairment charge be?
Why does it explicitly say undiscounted?
Because this is the rule US GAAP has set for carrying value. It says the assumption is that even if undiscounted cash flows are lower than carrying value, then the chances are that value of asset is overstated on balance sheet, because you, even on undiscounted basis, you are not expected to recover it. But this is not the measure for impairment charge. It is just to analyze whether impairment should be done or not. Once you have decided that it should be done, then impairment charge should be equal to carrying value minus fair value. Remember the difference. Impairment charge is not carrying value minus undiscounted future cash flow. It is just to decide whether impairment should be done or not. Impairment should be carrying value minus fair value. Any confusion? Okay, so here is an example. Under IFRS, what would the company report for the machine? Carrying amount is 18,000, correct. Undiscounted, not used in IFRS. Present value, value in use. Fair value if sold, 17. Cost to sell, 2,000. So, first step is you find out what is the recoverable amount in IFRS. In IFRS, recoverable amount is higher of the two. Value in use and fair value minus cost to sell. Fair value minus cost to sell is 15,000. Value in use is 16,000. So higher of the two is 16,000. So that means your recoverable amount is 16,000. What is your carrying value? 18,000. So what should be impairment charge? Impairment should be 18 minus 16, which is 2,000. So in IFRS, your impairment charge is 2,000. If you impair this asset by 2,000, what will be the balance sheet value? Balance sheet value will go from 18 to 16,000. So this should be the value on balance sheet. So new carrying amount on balance sheet is 16,000. This is IFRS. If you are using US GAAP, first question is, should you impair or not? How do you decide? You compare undiscounted cash flow with carrying amount. Carrying amount is less than undiscounted cash flows. If it is less than undiscounted cash flows, that means impairment should not be done. It should only be done if carrying amount is greater than undiscounted cash flows. So what will be the carrying amount on balance sheet? 18,000. You continue to carry it at 18,000. Although fair value is lower, but you continue to carry at 18,000 because US GAAP requires impairment if carrying amount is greater than undiscounted future cash flows. So this is how you impair. So moving on, impairment, this we have already discussed that intangible assets with finite life are amortized and may be impaired. But generally amortized, may be impaired if their value has decreased. With indefinite lives, not amortized but impaired and tested for impairment at least annually. If they have indefinite life, obviously you cannot amortize it, so you test it for impairment annually. Impairment of long-lived assets held for sale. If there is an asset which you have kept for selling purposes, so let's say there is an asset which is held for use and now you are reclassifying it to held for sale. When you reclassify it to held for sale, at that point of time you check out its carrying value and compare carrying value to recoverable amount, and if impairment has to be charged, you will charge impairment. So at the time of reclassification from held for use to held for sale, if an impairment has to be charged, you will charge the impairment, and that impairment loss will be recognized in P&L. So at the time of reclassification, if fair value exceeds fair value less cost to sell is lower than carrying amount, you will impair it, and impairment loss is recognized and asset is written down to fair value less cost to sale. Now once you have done that, now this held for sale asset will not neither be depreciated nor be amortized. Why? Because it is not an asset actually. It is an asset which you are holding not for utilizing it but for selling it. So as you are not using it, it will not be depreciated. You will be just selling it. Reversals of impairment on long-lived asset. So IFRS permit impairment losses to be reversed, which we have discussed earlier as well. If the recoverable amount of an asset increases regardless of whether the asset is held for use or held for sale. No matter if it is held for use or held for sale, its impairment losses can be reversed if its value increases. In US GAAP, once an impairment loss has been recognized for held for use asset, it cannot be reversed. That we discussed earlier as well. So in IFRS, you can reverse impairment loss. In US GAAP, you cannot reverse impairment loss. But if asset is held for sale, then you can reverse impairment loss in US GAAP. So far we had discussed this part. Now an additional point to remember is that if it is held for sale, then impairment loss can be reversed, because then you know that you will sell it, immediately, and so you will recognize that benefit. So some key differences to remember with IFRS and US GAAP. This is a very simple, straightforward question. Hypothetical company, as a result of revamping its menus to focus on healthier food items, sells 450 used pizza ovens and reports a gain of 1.2 million. Ovens had carrying amount of 1.9 million. Carrying amount means net book value. At what price did it sell the ovens? So selling price is equal to net book value plus gain minus loss. So net book value is 1.9 and gain is 1.2. So it is 3.1 million. Fairly simple question. Any confusion so far? Okay. So moving on, long-lived assets. So we have discussed long-lived assets. Now, how do you remove them from your business? When you are removing long-lived assets, you can remove them by in three key scenarios. Abandoning asset means you stop using that asset and you discard it. When you discard it on balance sheet, you will remove it. It will go down on balance sheet, and you are not receiving any cash against it. Why? Because you are not selling it, you are discarding it. So on balance sheet it will be reduced. On income statement you will have a loss because you have abandoned it. So you remove it from balance sheet, charge a loss on income statement. Or you can exchange it. When you exchange it, it goes down on balance sheet. A new asset comes in on balance sheet, and the differential of fair value is your gain or loss. So your gain or loss goes to income statement. Spin-off. Spin-off means that you completely remove assets from your books to books of another company. That is separating the business completely. So you completely separate whole balance sheet of that particular business from your books to the other business books. Like for example, Kraft had spun off Mondelez. So this is one company, let's say, and it has multiple businesses. So if you separate one business completely, and then this business has its own balance sheet, own P&L, everything, and this business has its own balance sheet, own P&L, that is known as spin off. You are not actually selling something, but you are separating the businesses. That is spin off. So these are the three ways in which you can remove assets from balance sheet. Presentation and disclosure, you can just go through it. What are the disclosure requirements? I don't think there is anything to memorize. Investment property we had discussed in previous class, so this comes here again. So let's just go through it again. What is investment property? If you have bought a property and you are using it, for example, you have office space in it, or you are using it for official purposes or for business, then that is a part of property, plant and equipment, and simply your asset. You will depreciate it. But if you have purchased this property not to use it, but to benefit from it in terms of rent or in terms of capital gains, then IFRS calls it an investment property. And IFRS again says that this property can either be valued at cost model, or it can be valued at fair value. But one key difference is that if you are valuing at fair value, so remember that if you record any other asset at fair value, where do you record changes in value? You record changes in value in revaluation reserve, right? You do not record it as a gain on income statement. You create a revaluation reserve. But here, if it is investment property and you are using it at uh, keeping it at fair value, then any gain or change in value would directly go to income statement, P&L. So that is the key difference to remember. Why? Because it is a kind of an investment. It is not an asset for use. It is a kind of investment. So any change in value is change in your investment value, and so it goes to P&L directly. In US GAAP, you know that already revaluation model is not used, so it will be recorded at cost model. Any problem so far? So last topic in this reading is leasing. This will come in later. There is a separate reading on long-term liabilities in which leasing is discussed. But just to give you an idea here, there are two types of leases: financial lease, also known as capital lease, and operating lease. Also, it is a kind of rent. In financial lease, you own the asset. So asset ownership is transferred, asset is bought. In operating lease, asset is not bought, it is only used, and a rent is paid. So it is only used for a rent. Rent is paid and it is used. This is the key difference. If you are buying it, it is your asset, it goes to balance sheet. If you are not buying it, only using it and paying rent, it does not go to balance sheet. This is the key difference between these two leases. There is a separate reading on it, so we will discuss it there.
Pakistan में it's for 99 days.
Sorry?
Financial lease, Pakistan में it's for 99 days.
Yes, but financial lease is now ending globally. So as per new standards, I don't know the exact timeline, but all operating leases has to be converted to operating leases has to be converted to financial lease. Sorry, financial lease is not ending, operating leases ending. So it should be shown on balance sheet. These assets or these liabilities should be shown on balance sheet. So last couple of questions. Has recently purchased and installed new machine for its manufacturing plant. Company incurred the following cost. Total cost of the machine on balance sheet is purchase price required to bring it in usable form, goes into balance sheet. Freight and insurance required to bring it into usable form, goes to balance sheet. Installation required, goes to balance sheet. Testing required, goes to balance sheet. Maintenance staff, no. So you sum up these and the answer would be 14,980. This is your capitalized cost on balance sheet. 500 goes to P&L. Which of the following amortization method is most likely to evenly distribute cost of intangible over its useful life? So which one will evenly distribute it? Straight line, because for a straight line method, amortization expense will be equal for all the years. Units of production can go up, can go down. Double declining, start from higher and then go down. And straight line, even. So this is it. Let's take a break.